The courtroom was buzzing long before the judge entered. The air felt electric, heavy with speculation, because everyone knew this wasn't just another case involving the Trump family. This time, it wasn't Donald Trump's bluster or Melania Trump's silence in the spotlight. It was Barron Trump. And the question that lingered in hushed conversations, whispered in media corridors, was about DNA. For weeks, rumors had spread across social media like wildfire. Sealed documents, mysterious tests, and whispered claims about Barron's lineage. Most people dismissed it as gossip, until the judge allowed the DNA evidence to be introduced. Suddenly, what seemed like a far-fetched headline was about to become reality. Donald Trump himself looked restless as he sat in the front row, flanked by his attorneys. His usual smirk was missing, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that suggested even he knew what was about to unfold could not be spun or silenced. On the other side of the aisle, Jasmine Crockett sat poised, her eyes locked on the evidence files in front of her. She was not there to play games. She was there to ensure the truth came out, no matter how uncomfortable it was for the Trump dynasty. The murmurs grew louder when Barron Trump walked in. At 17, he towered over most in the room. But on this day, height didn't matter. His face carried tension, frustration, and the simmering anger of someone who felt betrayed. The moment he sat down, all eyes turned to him. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. The room was charged with the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. The first half hour of proceedings was filled with procedural talk, motions, objections, the kind of back and forth that usually dulls an audience. But today, nobody lost focus. They were waiting for the bombshell. And then it came. The judge gave a nod, and the forensic expert stepped forward with the DNA report. The room went silent. Every cough, every shuffle, every breath felt amplified in the silence. The expert adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and began to speak. The words were clinical, detached, but the implications landed like thunder. The DNA test confirms. Before he could even finish the sentence, Barron shifted in his seat. His jaw clenched. His fists tightened on the table. And then, in a flash of fury that caught everyone off guard, he slammed his hand down and shouted, his voice cracking with anger. "This isn't true. This is a setup." Gasps rippled through the room. Donald Trump jerked forward, whispering sharply to his lawyers. Reporters scrambled to record every second. The explosion wasn't just in Barron's voice. It was in the very atmosphere of the courtroom. And that's when Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet, calm, deliberate, and unshaken by the chaos. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Trump may not like these results, but the truth doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't bend to anger. And it certainly doesn't disappear just because the Trump family doesn't approve." Her words drew a stark contrast. On one side, the explosive rage of Barron Trump, unprepared for the reality in front of him. On the other, the steady, unwavering composure of Jasmine Crockett, anchoring the room back to the truth. The media knew instantly what they had. The image of Barron Trump exploding, paired with Crockett's calm dismantling of denial. Within minutes, hashtags lit up online. Hashtag DNA storm. Hashtag Crockett exposes truth. Hashtag Trump meltdown. Clips of Barron slamming the table and shouting spread like wildfire. But inside the courtroom, the drama continued. Barron, still shaking with rage, turned to his father. "You knew about this, didn't you?" he accused, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Donald Trump leaned in, trying to shush him, but the microphones caught enough for the tension to become public. The image of Trump silencing his own son contrasted brutally with Crockett's insistence that the truth be heard. By the end of the day, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about DNA. It was about power, legacy, and the lengths to which people would go to control a narrative. And as Barron stormed out of the courtroom, reporters chasing behind him, Jasmine Crockett remained at her desk, calm, collected, and more determined than ever to make sure the truth was laid bare. The fallout from Barron's explosion was immediate and chaotic. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed, broadcasting live updates, spinning narratives, and amplifying the spectacle. Inside, the judge called for order, banging the gavel repeatedly until the room finally calmed. But the energy had already shifted. What began as a routine proceeding had spiraled into a political and personal earthquake. Donald Trump leaned into his son, whispering frantically, but Barron's face betrayed him. The boy was angry not just at the results, but at the feeling of betrayal that hung heavy in the air. He turned away, refusing to look at his father, his fists still clenched tightly. The cameras caught every second of it, magnifying the sense of division within the Trump family itself. And Jasmine Crockett knew exactly how to seize the moment. When the room quieted, she rose from her seat. Her voice was steady, but her words carried the weight of inevitability. "What we saw today," she said, addressing the judge but projecting to the entire room, was not just the release of evidence. What we witnessed was the collision between truth and denial. The facts are here, documented, verifiable, undeniable. And yet, the response we saw, explosions, anger, attempts to silence, tell us everything about the power of truth. Because when truth comes knocking, it doesn't care how powerful you are. It doesn't care what name you carry. It doesn't care how much wealth or influence you think you hold. It stands. The courtroom fell silent again, but this time the silence wasn't about shock. It was about absorption. Every word Crockett delivered landed with clarity. She wasn't speaking just to the judge. She wasn't even speaking just to the Trump family. She was speaking to the cameras, to the millions who would watch this moment unfold in real time, and to history itself. Trump's attorneys objected, insisting that her comments were grandstanding and irrelevant, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Every reporter in the room had already jotted down her words. Every viewer at home would hear them replayed over and over again. Meanwhile, Barron's explosion took on a life of its own. Clips of him shouting, "This isn't true. This is a setup," became instant viral material. Late-night hosts replayed it with commentary. Pundits debated whether his anger was justified or staged. Psychologists on morning shows analyzed the body language between father and son. What was once a private family matter had now become a public saga, one that Donald Trump could no longer control. But Crockett wasn't done. As the session resumed, she introduced additional evidence, emails, phone records, and testimony that reinforced the DNA results. Piece by piece, she constructed a narrative so solid that even the most loyal defenders of Trump struggled to poke holes in it. Her strategy was brilliant. She didn't just rely on the science of DNA. She built a wall of context around it, ensuring that denial would look not just desperate, but absurd. The more she spoke, the clearer the contrast became. On one side sat Barron, visibly shaken, his face red with humiliation. On the other sat Donald Trump, trying to maintain composure, but clearly losing control of the story. And in the center stood Jasmine Crockett, calm, composed, radiating authority. The optics were devastating for the Trumps. At one point, she turned toward Trump himself and delivered a line that would echo across headlines for days. "You can silence reporters. You can silence critics. But you cannot silence DNA. And you cannot silence me." The words hit like a hammer. The gallery gasped. Trump muttered angrily to his lawyers. And the judge, though trying to remain neutral, couldn't hide the flicker of intrigue that crossed his face. By the afternoon recess, the media frenzy had reached a fever pitch. Outside the courthouse, protesters and supporters clashed, their chants echoing blocks away. Some carried signs demanding accountability. Others shouted that the process was a sham. But everyone, no matter their allegiance, knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. The unraveling of a Trump narrative in real time. Back inside, the focus returned to Barron. Despite his earlier outburst, the judge allowed him to take the stand briefly. The courtroom hushed as he walked to the witness chair. His voice shook at first, but then grew louder, filled with the same frustration that had driven his explosion earlier. "This is all lies," he said. "They're trying to destroy my family. They're trying to destroy my father." For a moment, his words drew sympathy. After all, he was still young, still caught in a storm much bigger than himself. But Crockett was ready. She approached the stand slowly, respectfully, but firmly. "Barron," she began, "nobody here is trying to destroy you. Nobody here is trying to destroy your family. The only thing that destroys trust is lies. The only thing that destroys families is denial. What we're showing you is the truth. And truth doesn't destroy, it reveals. The exchange was painful to watch. Barron's face twisted with conflict. His anger was real, but so was his confusion. And in that moment, Crockett didn't just expose the Trump family to the public. She exposed the human cost of denial, the way lies tear apart even the closest bonds. By the time court adjourned for the day, the headlines were already blazing. Barron explodes, Crockett exposes. DNA truth turns courtroom upside down. Trump legacy in question. But the real storm was only beginning. The final day of the hearing arrived under a storm of anticipation. News crews lined the courthouse steps before dawn. Commentators filled the airwaves with predictions, and the public braced for the moment that could define not just the Trump family, but the story of truth itself. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Donald Trump sat rigid, arms crossed, his jaw set like stone. Barron, though present, looked smaller than before, weighed down by the fallout of his explosion. The fire from 2 days earlier had given way to exhaustion, the kind that comes when denial crashes into reality. And then there was Jasmine Crockett. Calm, focused, ready. She didn't enter the courtroom as if she were fighting a political rival. She entered as if she were carrying a responsibility far greater. Because to her, this wasn't about winning against the Trumps. It was about ensuring that the truth was undeniable. The session began with final arguments, and Trump's attorneys went first. Their strategy was clear: cast doubt, accuse bias, claim conspiracy. They spoke of attacks on the Trump name, of witch hunts, of media manipulation. They played to the emotions of supporters, not the facts. But even as they spoke, the hollowness of their words hung in the air. The DNA evidence was undeniable. The testimony airtight. The mountain of proof couldn't be wished away. When it was Crockett's turn, she rose slowly, deliberately, and walked to the center of the courtroom. Her voice carried not just authority, but a calm conviction that silenced the room. We have heard denials. We have heard distractions. We have heard every excuse that power can buy. But what we have not heard, what we cannot hear, is a refutation of the facts. Because facts do not bend to power. They do not kneel to wealth. And they do not vanish when someone shouts fake. They stand. She paused, letting the words sink in. The silence was heavy, the kind that demands attention. Then she held up the DNA report, its pages thick with data, its meaning simple. This report is not opinion. It is not speculation. It is truth, written in the very code of life itself. And no amount of denial can erase it. Trump shifted uncomfortably. His face flushed. Barron lowered his eyes. The gallery leaned forward. But Crockett wasn't finished. She pivoted, turning her focus to the human side of the story. This isn't just about a family name. This isn't just about politics. This is about what happens when lies are allowed to fester, when denial replaces accountability, when power believes it can silence truth. What we saw in this courtroom was not just evidence. It was the unraveling of a legacy built on avoiding it. Her words carried a weight that no outburst could match. For every moment Barron had exploded, for every denial Trump had muttered, Crockett's composure now stood in stark, undeniable contrast. And then came the line that would echo across history. You can silence your critics. You can silence the media. But you cannot silence DNA. And you cannot silence me. The room erupted, not with applause, because the judge demanded order, but with energy. Reporters scrambled to record, to clip, to broadcast. The word spread instantly across social media. Within minutes, hashtags like #CrockettExposesTruth and #DNA-doesn't-lie dominated the digital world. The judge, visibly moved by the clarity of Crockett's case, thanked both sides before adjourning. But the outcome was already written in the court of public opinion. As Trump and Barron left the courtroom, they walked under the weight of humiliation. Trump's usual bravado was gone, replaced by silence. Barron, still simmering, avoided the cameras, his earlier explosion now replaying endlessly across screens worldwide. And then Crockett stepped outside. A sea of microphones and flashing cameras met her, but she didn't gloat. She didn't bask in the attention. She simply spoke with the same conviction that had carried her inside. Today was not about me. It was not about them. It was about proving that truth, no matter how deeply buried, cannot be silenced. And that matters, not just in this courtroom, but for every person who has ever been told their voice didn't count. The crowd erupted in cheers. Her words spread like fire, not just in headlines, but in the hearts of those who watched. People who had grown weary of spin and spectacle found in her a voice of clarity. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman or a lawyer or a political figure. She was the embodiment of accountability itself. In the days that followed, the narrative was clear. Editorials called her performance a masterclass in truth-telling. Commentators labeled the hearing the day the Trump narrative cracked. And social media crowned her as the unshakable force who dared to stand where others wavered. As for Donald Trump, the humiliation stuck. His usual tactics of distraction and denial couldn't erase the image of his son exploding, nor the calm voice of Jasmine Crockett dismantling his defenses. And for Barron, the moment marked the painful collision of youth with legacy. The realization that even the loudest explosions can't silence DNA. The courtroom may have emptied, but the story lived on. Because, in the end, what Jasmine Crockett exposed wasn't just DNA results. She exposed the fragility of power built on denial. She exposed the cost of trying to silence truth. And she exposed for the world to see that even the mightiest stage can be flipped upside down by one undeniable fact.